She looks like a refrigerator. Fire her. And she was not fired.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, everybody, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to the Lincoln Project podcast. I am joined today by a guy who knows the stuff, a guy who knows the inside workings of Trump world and the thinking that is informing this wild ride of a second Trump term. It's Michael Wolff. He has a terrific new book coming out. It is called All or Nothing: How Trump Recaptured America. I wanted to welcome Michael to the show. And Michael, I want to say this: your Instagram lives, reels, have become a very addictive new thing that you do. Sort of the contemporaneous accounting of a lot of the things the Trump administration is doing and thinking internally, as it contrasts to what they're saying externally. So, first off, let's talk about this book. Where's the distinction and the difference in the tonality and the internal mood of Trump world and Trump himself as a person between the era of Fire and Fury and the era of All or Nothing?
I think it just gets more Trumpy. The nature of the Trump enterprise is, you can do much worse than seeing this as in reality show terms.
Sure.
He has to, in order to hold the attention of the public, he has to keep the conflict, not only keep the conflict going, but ramp up the conflict.
Right.
So
Right.
we are at a new level of Trump conflict, which he has to do because conflict, the same old conflict is no longer conflict. So now we have to invade Greenland.
Right. Right. I mean, this sort of rise and fall story and rise again story with Trump. His exile was remarkably brief. He started reassembling his people and his power almost immediately after he had a sort of lacuna there for a few months.
Well, I would push back a little.
Okay. Okay.
A little. It was brief, but it was deep. In other words, there was nobody who thought that he was going to dig himself out of this hole.
Right.
And even there was a sense that he didn't necessarily want to. He went back to Mar-a-Lago. Everybody treated him like he still was the president. He was having a great time.
DJing on the porch.
Yeah, it was kind of better than being president because he had no work to do. And I wouldn't even say that he assembled a team, went to work on this. It was a kind of a happenstance, a bunch of grifters hanging out at Mar-a-Lago with nothing else to do.
Right.
Suddenly comprised his team, and that's a good team for him because he doesn't want a team that tells him how to do anything.
Right.
He wants it all has to come from him, and you have to accept what he says abjectly. The one interesting thing about this is that he got this woman, Susie Wiles, very early.
I know Susie.
And I'd be interested in what in your view on that. And she was put into this. Jared didn't want this role. It was like, get me out of here.
Correct.
So he goes and recruits Susie Wiles, who's over, for a political operative is kind of over the hill. And she comes in to be the office administrator at Mar-a-Lago, really. And it turns out just in her relationship to Trump is kind of kismet. She's exactly what he needs.
She does have that, and I've known Susie since the late 80s. Good God Almighty, I'm old. But she is a methodical, organized, disciplined operator, which I don't think he'd ever actually had anyone around him like that in the first campaign, certainly.
Nor
Um,
nor nor in Trump Tower. So I mean, I think this is like a
Interesting.
big surprise to him, and I'm trying to figure out how this came to work so well. I think partly because of her personality. She
Well, yes, she also wanted revenge on Ron DeSantis, and
absolutely.
that drove her heavily in that role.
I think absolutely. But she also understood that you had to stay out of his way. Her job was to make the trains run on time.
Mhm.
His job was to be Donald Trump, and there wasn't necessarily a crossover there. And and then I think she was lucky during the campaign. Again, this is my reading, so would love to hear yours.
Sure.
But during the campaign, he was largely preoccupied with the legal attacks
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
himself,
Right.
um, and that meant that he wasn't really interfering with the campaign. And Trump, interference really undermines all organization because
Yes.
he's capricious, he demands things, then can't remember that he's demanded them. Yeah, it's a mess. But she was in the position of of being really kind of free to run the campaign.
Susie Wiles was a very different character in his life, different than a Brad Parscale or a Kellyanne Conway or a Steve Bannon or anybody else who had their own sort of broader agenda. And your point, though, that she was sort of left to her own devices, I think in some ways was the decisive thing in the campaign. He was obsessed with the court cases and spending the bulk of his time on those, right? While Susie was putting together operations and systems and plans and everything else to make the campaign work right.
Yeah, and not only that, in the other campaigns, there was always a hemorrhage of money in
Right.
directions we don't know where it was going. And she was extremely disciplined about this, and he responded to that.
Yeah, I think that helped him a lot. But I have a bifurcation in the campaign. I look at everything before the assassination attempt as that the court cases were a center of gravity that was pulling his attention, and that I had heard from people inside that world were actually rattling him a lot. Talk to us about like how that first part of the year felt, and then after the assassination attempt, talk to us about what you've learned about his response to that behind the scenes, and about how that altered the velocity of the vector of the campaign.
I think there were two things. I mean, he was absolutely rattled by the court stuff. And it's interesting and says a lot about him that he endured and pressed forward, because
Mhm.
this really made him crazy, and you can see this. You can actually chart this kind of I don't this mania and depressiveness on Truth Social. If anyone had bothered to look at that, which really few people did, what you have is a person unspooling almost every night.
Mhm.
And um and there's no question he saw this as is this was the existential event in Donald Trump's life. And there are actually have been many existential
Sure.
events in Donald Trump's life, but this was he understood it was I mean that's why the title of my book is All or Nothing. And and it's extraordinary and weird that he set this up like this, that he was willing to say, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice myself, go to jail, whatever, and not do any of the logical things to ameliorate or plea bargain. um, and instead I'm going to go for broke, and that's what he did, and successfully, obviously.
So the assassination attempt, that is this big moment of I really view it as it solidified his base permanently. It changed I think the chemistry of some of the doubting Republicans and locked his base down for him pretty intensely after that point. What was Trump's feeling about Harris during this campaign? Because I heard varying stories from inside that world. Some people were like that they always felt like they had her number, and other folks told me at the time, including people I would have thought would have been more skeptical, like, we may have a problem here. This woman may be a problem for us. What was your observation
Well,
of
I think there are
his
two
view?
things. I mean,
Yeah.
his view was always the easiest person to beat was Joe Biden. The
Right.
second easiest person to beat was Kamala Harris.
Hmm.
He started to doubt that and get incredibly nervous during the month of August
Right.
when all of that press attention turned to her. So that really got him actually where he lived. He couldn't get the headlines. She was getting all of the
Hmm.
headlines, even after the assassination. And he would say, they're stealing my assassination from me, or my attempted assassination. Um, and she was there every day, and he didn't know what to do against this. And people in the
Right.
campaign were saying, no, you got to focus on the economy, you got to focus on this. And that's the point in which he went with his own instincts, which was to focus on her. Um,
Right.
and start to hit her, and she
Hmm.
was, I mean, any bad thing that he could think of to say about
Right.
her, he said. And then the campaign would go crazy and say, what do you do, and they would have other people call him to say, you have to be disciplined, you have to be focused. And he would say, no, I don't. that is
Right.
not how that's not how essentially that's not how I roll. That has never gotten me anything. What has always gotten me something is ad hominem attacks, although he
Right.
didn't
A
say it
vicious
that way.
personal attacks right at his political or business opponents. And he does have a kind of feral relentlessness about those kind of things. So we come up
Yeah,
to
and
election
and
day.
also they're compelling, and he recognizes this. To talk about the economy is okay, the New York Times, yeah, everybody, political
Right.
reporters will get this, but it is not fundamentally compelling to a large
Sure.
audience.
Sure. So we come up to election day. Trump wins. And we enter this moment where everybody in Washington did the same thing. I saw them. I'm sure you saw the same thing. People were rationalizing, okay, he doesn't have anything else to prove. We're going to have ordinary things going on here. There'll be a little bit of a kerfuffle about Project 2025, but this will be normal again. We'll make sure that it's not insane. I heard that from a lot of money people and a lot of DC operator types, and I kept beating my head saying, "Are you nuts? This is now he's now completely unhinged. He's unbound." And I think the avatar of that has been Elon Musk. And I want to ask you about what you're hearing and what you know about his relationship with Elon Musk, how that has defined this opening phase of the second term,
Well,
and how long you think Elon has. Because I think you said the other day, Trump's doing that thing he does and calling his friends and saying, "Hey, do you think so and so's doing a good job? Is he helping me or hurting me? Does he seem okay?" I'm curious where you see Elon now, and like talk to us about what
okay,
you've learned about the
two
relationship.
here are two views on this. A lot of people within um, the Trump organization
Hmm.
and the Trump circle have said, okay, this is Steve Bannon 2.0.
Sure.
They're both on the cover of Time magazine. They're both, the president's brain or whatever. They're both the sort of disruptor point person, both getting headlines worse than his headlines. And that's all good. And Steve lasted 6 months, and that's a reasonable measure of how long Elon will last.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people I've talked to feel like that once Trump starts the call cycle of asking whether somebody is doing a good job,
Yeah. Oh,
you're
yeah.
all
That's totally
you're
the beginning of
already
the
you're
end.
already on
Yes.
death's door. You just don't
Yes.
know it yet.
But it's just Elon. There's Elon as Steve Bannon, but then in the last couple of days, really last week, I've heard this new point of view from the circle that Elon is not Steve Bannon. Elon is Rudy Giuliani, um, which is suddenly really, really interesting. And
Uh,
in the line that I got from somebody, in the pretty close circle there,
sure.
is the only thing that's missing for in Elon's search for massive fraud in the U.S. government is a news conference at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping Shop.
Right,
Uh,
right.
Hey, everybody, we're back. It's day 2 of my interview with Michael Wolff. We had some technical difficulties with a tree coming down up the block, tore out the power, tore out the cable. No fun whatsoever, but we're back 100%, running strong. And I want to pick back up where we were, Michael. First off, I want to talk again about Susie Wiles a little bit, who a lot of people perceived correctly that she was the first organizational force in Trump's professional life probably ever who could build some walls around him, who could bound him a little bit. Um, where do you see Susie's position right now, given the primacy of Elon and the degree to which the White House, in the wake of Signalgate, seems to be in a bit of a turmoil as to who's in charge?
well, I think she is the second most important person in the White House, and I think that she is the differential between the first administration and this administration. I
I
mean,
agree with that.
I mean, she really is in charge. She really has the West Wing, to the extent possible. Let me emphasize that, locked down. So, you have very much, at least very much for Trump world, an orderly business like West Wing because she's in charge, and she's tough. She's no nonsense. She's businesslike. She's all of those things that Trump has not had in the past, and she's not. And this is important, particularly political or particularly ideological. So this is a new world. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean it will stay a new world. That doesn't mean that Trump's essential Trumpness doesn't will out, and it might be happening now. The fact that this the Hegseth chat leak
Right.
is a real indication, and let's put a flag on this. That around Trump is always fundamentally the gang that can't shoot straight. Um,
Mm-hmm.
now,
Mm-hmm.
now she's different from this, but ultimately she is just one person, and this is what she is fighting against. And she fought this battle throughout the campaign. I think
Mm-hmm.
she understood. She, it's not a matter of thinking. She very clearly understood that the Trump impulses to hire lackeys and toadies and idiots, was the thing that she was there to try to restrain the best she could.
That idea of Susie as the sort of school marm, as Susie as the principal of the high school full of rowdy kids. I think that analogy holds up pretty well, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure at some point that the very bad Trump will come out and just say, "I don't want anybody to tell me no.
Yeah,
I
no, no,
don't want
no. I
anybody to
mean,
say
I
no
mean,
to me."
very clearly. I mean, I think that she is first thing. Also, I understand, that she's taken a lot of flack. He's frustrated about this Hegseth thing.
Sure.
He's frustrated, but he can't fire anybody because the media wants him to fire her, so he can't do that.
Hmm.
So he's just angry, and he's been taking this out on a bunch of people, but including her. Um, and one of her talents is that she's been able to be pretty stoic about this. At one point in the campaign, a particularly bad point in the campaign,
Hmm.
she just left. She went to France. 2 weeks, she's out of the campaign.
I heard about this.
And nobody knew why, where, and it was, it was a kind of a weird, uh, without question, an unusual moment. Um,
A lot of psychological warfare going on there, I think, with her in some ways. where most people just break with him, and she's a stranger character than that. She's a lot tougher than that, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, it's hard to understand how she could not, but she's put up with a lot. In 2016, when he didn't know her, and then he was
Hmm.
introduced. She was running Florida at the time,
Yep.
um, and he came down and he met her, and they spoke quite briefly, and then he left, and then he said to his someone in the traveling entourage, "She looks like a refrigerator. Fire her." Um, and she was not fired, and she went on to
Hmm.
flip the state and
Right.
and begin this long career. But I mean, I think she's very clearly understands who Trump is. The other thing which is interesting about her is she is very much focused on leaks. Um,
Yes, he likes
and
that.
he likes that, and that is always been the Achilles heel of the Trump administration.
Hmm.
Everybody leaking like crazy.
Andy Card once said to me that good White Houses leak on purpose, bad White Houses just leak. And I think that's a truism. So you're picking up that Trump can't fire anybody because it would be seen as a violation of his like Roy Cohn rules: never apologize, never admit wrongdoing, always attack the people who discovered your wrongdoing. um, but right now I'm hearing there's a lot of pressure on Waltz quietly coming, and I think it's coming from Susie. I can't confirm that. There's a lot of pressure on Mike Waltz right now from friends of the president. Like, you're the one who has to jump off the sled. You're the one who did this. Um, so we won't fire you, but you need to probably think about how you're going to help the president. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, no. I mean that Walz is in trouble. He's getting a lot of flack on this. He's getting a lot of flack from Trump. He's getting flack from Susie, who's getting flack from Trump.
Hmm.
Um, but in the way they do this in Trump world, is he's not fired, but he's marginalized, and then
Right.
6 months from now he will be
He'll go
out.
spend more time with his family, etc.
Right.
um,
Unless then he is abject in the way that Trump demands, and then he's back in the fold.
Right. I was told that yesterday's performance by Marco Rubio, talking about snatching people off the street like it was nothing, was a response to getting pressure from, like, he heard that Trump was angry that he wasn't completely on board with the messaging on the Signal thing, and so he had to go out and do a little song and dance, little minstrel show for Trump yesterday. It it really is striking to me, like, almost none of this anymore is about their jobs. It's all about playing to the boss 100% of the time. It's always about, like, did he see me do this interview? I heard the Waltz interview on Fox just set Trump out of his mind when he was on with Ingram. I heard it sent him bonkers. Like, that was the worst interview I've ever seen. What's wrong with that guy? Why is he so stupid? The whole thing.
How did it end up in your
well, that's
phone?
what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem.
That
If
is
there-
what
if there are
that's what
numbers,
we've got the best technical
Yeah.
minds, right?
That's
And that's
disturbing.
where, I mean,
You've got it down. You've got the dialogue.
We probably talked to some of the same people, but I do think that there's a degree of the Trump calling thing, which we've talked about a little bit. Of he's calling around to people like, is this guy okay? Should I keep this guy? Is he healthy? Is he good for me? Is he doing a good job? And like you said to me before, the answer is always no. It's terrible, sir.
Yeah, and this creates this incredible fear that pervades this. He puts this out, and
Hmm.
that's a Trumpism. Put it out. Put it out
Yes.
there. Put it out there. Um, and so, which keeps everybody off balance, and reinforces what everybody knows, that you have to play to Trump. What does he think about me? What is
Hmm.
he thinking? What does he think about me? How do I speak to that? How do I address that? There's an interesting thing that I've been hearing. Pam Bondi,
Hmm.
who you must do you
I
know
know
from
Pam. I know Pam very well.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, Now I hear, and I don't know this, and I've never met her, but I do hear from lots of people that she's uniquely not smart. Um,
That is correct.
okay.
Pa-
So anyway, he is on the phone with her constantly and
mhm.
treats her like a, like a functionary, like a secretary.
Right.
This is what we're going to do. This is what I want you to do. Have you done this?
Hmm.
Which is unique in the modern history of the Justice Department
Certainly.
and the role of Attorney General. Absolutely unique. I mean, it essentially throws out the office of the Attorney General.
That's right. It has become the Trump law firm, and I've known Pam Bondi for 25 years, since she was a state attorney in Tampa, Florida. Was a very um, indifferent lawyer by everybody that I talked to, but was well presented, was pretty, was blonde, was good in front of the cameras with the sort of snappy, soundbitey thing, um, but was backed up by a lot of actual attorneys. Uh, as Attorney General of Florida, the word hot mess barely begins to cover it. And if they had had actual hearings, Pam Bondi's whole messy life would have been rolled out, because most attorneys general have been people of great personal probity and, serious people. No, not in the least. I mean, there are a lot of Pam Bondi stories, and they're all messy. So his reliance on her is not surprising to me, because I think he likes the fact that he knows she will never say no. It will always
Yeah,
be yes, sir, Mr. President.
yeah, and even that the reliance on her, he doesn't rely on her for advice. He relies on her to just carry out what he wants to
Correct.
do.
Right.
And it is, I mean, people, even the people who know how he rolls are
Hmm.
surprised by this, and surprised that somebody would take this as she is. I mean, it is just very much, she's the functionary. Also, that Boris is involved in this, Boris
Uh-huh.
Epshteyn,
Epstein. Yeah.
um, and and him relaying the orders from the president. This is what we're going to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Boris has kept his head down in the press, but he is definitely. uh, I've heard rumbles about him, being a power center, an
Absolutely.
expanding power
Yeah,
center.
I mean, and expanding, and which is very strange. Remember, because he doesn't have a formal role.
No. Right.
So therefore, because he doesn't have a formal role, he has all these outside clients.
Hmm. What?
So, so
Jason
he's,
Miller. Jason Miller. Same story.
yeah, so he's making millions of dollars,
Hmm.
and and essentially operating as though he is still in the White House.
It is a kind of remarkable, and Boris is a bad actor. Boris is a bad guy, and I don't know, people sort of lost track of him a little bit, but this is not a guy of goodwill. He is a dark figure in that world, and there's some dark figures in that
Well,
world.
even that, I might even push back on that,
Okay.
because his darkness is just a reflection of Trump's darkness. So
Sure.
so he is not, other than that he has his own clients and billing them in whatever way. Um, he his purpose there is just to do Trump's bidding and just to say what Trump wants him to say. I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
not literally, not an independent operator, not an independent life.
I did hear at one point that Susie wanted to keep him far, far away from female staff members during the campaign, because that
Um,
apparently was an ongoing drumbeat issue with Boris.
um, yeah, I never quite heard that. And for a lot of the campaign, it was strange. A lot of the campaign, he wasn't there,
Yep.
so he was always on the phone with Trump. So I mean, they were literally 10 times a day, 20 times
Hmm.
a day,
Hmm.
sometimes more. But where was Boris? Where
Right.
where is he? And that then gave rise to the fact that had he flipped in any of the various investigations.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's a story I kind of recount in the book. I mean,
Sure.
he became a very convenient character in the book because he is so extreme.
Mm-hmm. Right. And he's one of those weird characters. I think in Trump's world, I almost think of him as like it's like Trump. It's like Trump using ChatGPT as a therapist or something. He likes Boris because Boris will say whatever you're doing is fine. It's all fine. You're fine. You're good. You're doing the right thing, sir. Wanted to ask you about what you're hearing and how you parse the role of Karoline Leavitt right now, because she has been a rising star in that MAGA universe, and he loves her. That sort of in your face fu performance all the time. Where do you see her headed? What's the sort of read on where she's at in that?
Well,
in that
I actually don't think she's very important.
Really?
She's she's the he likes to have a press secretary who looks like that. And the guy who should have been the press secretary, who essentially functions like this, and now who has the role of the communications director, is Stephen Cheung.
Right, who does not look the part.
And Stephen, who Trump really likes because he's always, whatever, all his retorts are virulent. But Stephen weighs literally 400 pounds.
Yeah,
so
he's a big guy.
So so that he can't be in front of the camera. So
right.
Karoline it gets that job.
Interesting.
And otherwise, Jason Miller probably would have had that job, or could have had that job. Certainly would have had that job in 2017.
Right.
And so she's the kind of the lower down person on the comms team who looks the part.
It's an evolving and ongoing story. And Michael Wolff, folks, there's almost no one you could imagine who's more tied in and who knows what's happening inside behind that orange curtain. The book, folks, is All or Nothing: How Trump Recaptured America. It's a remarkable read. I encourage you to get it. And Michael, let's keep talking, man, because I always enjoy sitting down with you. And folks, stay tuned and get All or Nothing. It's a fascinating book.
Good night and good luck.